Welcome to College and Knowledge, Learning Allies podcast for college students who are blind or visually impaired. This show brings together the three core elements of Learning Allies College Success Program: mentors, resources, and community. I'm your co-host, Rashad Jones, lifelong musician, disability advocate, and college success mentor. We're back and we're very excited to bring you this next season. As you guys all know, this year holds a lot of unknowns, but we at College Knowledge are here to help you navigate through it. Our first episode of the season will introduce you to our program director, Mary Alexander. Mary was not available to kick off the podcast in the spring, but she has returned and jumped back into the excitement of a vibrant group of initiatives. I had the pleasure of speaking with her a few weeks ago to learn a little bit more about her and the huge role she plays in the College Success Program.
Mary Alexander has worked at Learning Ally as part of outreach since 2004. And in 2014, she became the National Director of Blindness Initiatives at Learning Ally. She lives outside of Dallas, Texas with her husband and her son, Cooper, the youngest of her three children, and many animals. Cooper is also blind. Mary, welcome to College Knowledge.
Thank you, Rashad.
So my first question for you, Mary, is how did your life bring you to Learning Ally? So what experiences or what was it that drew you to Learning Ally?
Okay, well, in 2004, Learning Ally was called Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic at that point. It was RFB&D was
I remember that
version of it. Yeah, you probably remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the students, that we are working with now in the College Success Program used RFB&D in some of the prior formats, other than download that we have now. But what brought me to RFB&D was my youngest son that you'd mentioned, Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
He had been born in 1995, developed hydrocephalus, and then had a severe reaction, I guess. When you have hydrocephalus, it's usually because of brain injury, and his was from meningitis. And he has cortical visual impairment, which leaves him with very little usable vision, and cerebral palsy. So, the prognosis on Cooper was not really all that great, and we were always worried about, his education and what, parents always say, what will my kid become, But I became very interested, though, in ways of educating people who are visually impaired in how he was going to read, especially. I'm an avid reader. And that always was something that I wanted to be sure he was able to do. So I wasn't sure if he would be able to read Braille successfully. So I looked into other, as it turns out, he's a wonderful Braille reader. So that was, so I didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But I knew that audio was something he also liked. So by the time he's in third grade, he'd already been listening to commercially available audiobooks. And I found out about RFB&D at the same time as I found out that they were looking for someone to work in the school system, because we had just received a big state grant. And so I was one of the first outreach employees that they'd hired through that, and got to work with some really great people in Austin around that grant, which we still have a type of it today in place in Texas. So that's a really good thing. But that's what brought me here. And I worked in schools. I worked with teachers of the visually impaired. I worked with teachers who taught students with dyslexia. I learned a lot about both of those things. And so I had a really good beginning.
Right. Well, I've got a follow-up question. So what did that work involve at that time, if you don't mind?
No, it's no problem. So I've always worked out of my home with RFB&D because we don't have a studio in the Dallas area. But the work would involve, because we got funding from the state, we needed to place, we had memberships at that point for schools. And so we needed to place these memberships in schools. And it was basically learning and raising awareness about RFB&D and how audiobooks can help students learn. It's not a crutch. It's not anything that you would use just purely for enjoyment, although you can. But for students, it's something that's vital, especially if they have trouble reading the printed word. So educating them about that was my primary job. And at that point in 2004, it was all done in person. So I would spend a lot of time in the classroom with teachers, developing curriculum for their students to use in conjunction with how they were learning to read. So it really fostered a deep love in me about early literacy for Braille readers, as well as for low vision students, because I could see that all of our blind students, in the state, were getting RFB and D as part of their IEP process that they would go through, but many of the low vision students weren't, and that really bothered me. So,
Gotcha.
I was on a campaign, Rashad.
Well, that's great to have such activism and someone who's so dedicated to literacy and making sure that everybody has access to it. So I think that's great. Kind of leads us a little bit into our next question, which is, how did you become interested in college success for students who are blind or visually impaired?
Yeah, so in 2013, Learning Ally did some great research. We hired an outside firm to do the research for us, but the research entailed, it was ethnographic, and it entailed following about 26 students who were blind or visually impaired, possibly low vision, in primarily the tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey area. And the research came back. We actually asked them to do this research so we could figure out a better audio book, right, for the college student. We did this also in conjunction. Our partnership was with LaBelle Fund for the Blind out of New York City. They are our primary #1 partner. They have always supported us in this. And so, but we went into it wanting to be really open-minded. So when the research firm came back and they showed us their findings, really needing a better audiobook was not the top of their list. There was all of these other findings they had from how students were they weren't coming out of the secondary school system prepared to direct their learning as they needed to do once they hit college. As you know, Rashad, being a mentor that you are, you have to be able to speak for yourself in college, direct a whole group of people or system, right? And be able to communicate well, use your technology well, be able to get around campus if you're on campus. There's so many pieces to it, and expecting a high school student or an 18-year-old to come out of high school prepared to do that with the current prep program that we have in place, it just is not working. And so we saw that, we sat down, there were several of us in this development team. We had a great team, and one of them is still with us today, Kristen Watucky, who is our curriculum person. She was also on this same team. But the other part of what brought me to this program and helped me to be a stronger advocate for it within Learning Ally was I had served on the board since 2009 at the Texas School for the Blind. And that's a position that the governor appoints you to, and it's primarily a fiduciary position. But it helped me understand how Schools for the Blind are preparing our students. And it's actually a lot different than how public schools prepare our students. I think the students that come out of TSBVI are much better prepared to direct their own learning, to advocate for themselves. And yeah, they're so on top of it, and they're so independent. And so I've tried to take what I've learned there and put that into the program. I haven't always been as successful as I'd like, but I just think it's important to. Also, my son was starting college at that same point, and so some of the learnings from some of the stuff that he struggled with, I've tried to do that as well. But I'm pretty proud of what we've come up with, though, Rashad. I think that the mentor part of our program is probably the most important part. Not that any of the others are not important, but that connection between someone who is like you and who gives you this great advice because they've lived it. You really, there's no way to duplicate
Trust
that.
me, if this had been around when I was in college, I think I would have been much better off. But we don't have time for that story. But it's certainly, I'll say this, it was certainly a struggle having the perception that I was the only one around
Yeah.
just doing that being a blind visually impaired person and in college and in music specifically. So it was very difficult. So I know that in my mentorship, I always try to make sure that my mentees know that I'm available. They can reach out to me at any time, and we can discuss what's going on, and you know, I offer whatever feedback I can. But you know, just knowing that someone else is there is something that I think you're right, is priceless. I think it's priceless.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. So, are there any principles of program design that you followed as you designed the program?
So, you know, I was part of it, as I said earlier, I was part of a team on this. And I think our early principles of design, I'm sure that Jeff Ho, who runs our analytics department now, he was the head of our solutions department at that point. And he most likely could answer that question better than I could. But I would say the types of things that I really fought for and that Kristen and I both agreed on were, first of all, we had to design this program so that students could get the information that they needed anytime, anywhere, which is why our entire program is virtual. The other principle that has always been of the utmost importance is accessibility. Anything we do on the College Success Program, the systems that we use, hiring our mentors, you know, we constantly are questioning and pushing, are these systems, are these resources, are they accessible? Are they the best accessibility they can be, or are they just kind of, sort of, you know? And so I know that when we were first hiring mentors, our HR systems, you know, we had to change some of those. And I think that we have a much better system for it now, probably even than when you were hired, Rashad. But hopefully, but you know, it's that constant pushing and questioning that, in a way that is not seen as harping, I guess is the word. I want to be a good advocate, but I've always firmly believed that to be a good advocate, you have to be a little pushy. And so we always push for that in the program. And I think that you can see that in everything we do. We're designing a website now for the program. And that is the primary design focus, is it has to be easy to navigate. The information, we want it to be of the utmost quality. And yeah, so those are just the things that we always, there's probably a word for that, and it's not intelligent design or anything. That's not really it. But anyway, yeah.
There's some term for it. Yeah. But just making sure. Exactly. So just making sure that the population who needs it, so i.e. the college students, are able to get what they need in a way that's not stressful or anything like that, and having access to that.
Yeah, and it's easier than any other website they've ever gone to. You know, I mean, the students we work with, they already struggle, some of them, with technology. Why would we put barriers, you know, up for them? So anyway, I hope that we accomplish that, especially with the new website.
So our next question, Mary, is, what is your job like from day to day? I know earlier we talked about what your job was like when you began working for, at the time, recordings for the blind and dyslexic, but what is it like now at Learning Ally?
Well, you know, it's interesting. What my job was like a year ago, which is the same job, right, as I have now, and what it's like today are very different, because my job has always entailed a lot of traveling and representing the organization at conferences, and I do a lot of public speaking for that type of thing, as well as building partnerships and agreements with both state departments of voc rehab and foundations. And so travel was always a big part of my job, and has been ever since I started. So in March, of course, that all changed, and so my job primarily now is I still do the same type of partnership building and developing relationships, but it's all done on Zoom or the phone, and it's a lot different. But my job is, as the National Program Director for Initiatives for the Blind, is it's primarily stewarding our programs, right? We have a certain budget that I have to be sure we're following. And so there's some finance work that it has to be done every month. I manage people, right? So I have several people that are on our CSP team, and so we have all of us have group meetings once a week, but then we also have some one-on-one meetings, and then I of course report to somebody. So in any kind of job, you are most likely always going to report to somebody, even if you're the CEO of Learning Ally. We have a board, a national board that you report to. So nobody's a free agent, and we all have goals, and we work really hard to be sure that we meet those goals each year. But in my role, I do have to, as I said, do a lot of outside work with external partners. But I also, like right now, we are developing this new website. So I do a lot of work with the website developer, making sure that the project plan that he shared with us is something that he's following, and that we're getting the best bang for our money, right? Because we're paying for it, obviously. Yeah, so that kind of thing. So it's kind of funny, when I first started, I was much more of what you would consider doing hands-on stuff, right? I was working in schools. I was dealing directly with the people who were going to be using our product, for lack of a better word. And now when you're at that management level or director level, you stop doing that direct stuff, which most people in my position miss. Having the interactions with people like our students is something that I've always valued a lot. But that's also one way that my board service comes in, is because I have direct interaction with a lot of students that way, and I enjoy that.
Good. I think I know for sure if our roles were reversed, I know I would be begging to get back with the students. Just that interpersonal interaction, and just being able to relate to them and help them through, or celebrate their triumphs is really something that's important to me. So I know that
we have a great leadership team at Learning Ally. Our CEO, Andrew Friedman, and our Chief Operating Officer, Cynthia Hamburger. They're great. But let me tell you, students are a lot more fun than them. So.
Well, great. That's good to know. You kind of alluded to what's in my next question, and that is, what kind of projects are you looking forward to in the future? What's coming up next? What do you think?
So with the College Success Program, last year we asked LaBelle to help us investigate and develop a program that tried to bring the preparedness to students at a younger age. And so we are in the midst of, at the same time as we're doing a website, we're in the midst of developing something, leveraging what we already have in our program, right? For students that are still in high school. And, teachers of the visually impaired are so busy. And we know that. I mean, they see babies to 21, and are dealing with students who have all types of vision loss, and they have to be jacks of all different trades, right? So we're trying to develop something that will help them, right, during this transition period, which is hard, but also possibly something for parents, because I know, being a parent, when we started talking about transition during Cooper's IEPs, it honestly, even though I work in this field, it wasn't overly clear to me what they were trying to say, because they use a lot of jargon, and by the time you start talking about it, you're sort of almost hardened, right, to the fact that there's all this additional stuff now that needs to be done. Well, you've done things as your child's advocate this way for so many years. Now they really want you to kind of turn and not do that anymore, and let the child kind of step in. And so I think that we leave it too late, a lot of that. And so we're excited about that. I can't really tell you exactly what it's going to look like yet, because we're not even sure. But it will be virtual, just like our other program, and because that is one of our principles. But I'm excited to see what it'll do. It'll honestly, I hope that it involves direct interaction with students, but with the FERPA laws that are in place for K through 12, that may or may not be really feasible. So it may be more parent-teacher type interactions. I don't know. But I'm excited. I think it'll be fun, and I'm looking forward to it.
Great. That's very exciting and encouraging to know. And so finally, Mary, what advice would you give to a college student who is blind or visually impaired?
The most important thing you can do, well, actually, there's two really important things: that you learn how to ask for help, and that you learn it in a variety of ways, and that you make yourself practice it. You know, it's basically learning how to advocate for yourself in a really positive way, right? And I think that the more you start doing it, the stronger you'll be at it. I don't care if you're shy, if you it really doesn't matter. You need to do this especially if you're blind or visually impaired. And then the second thing I would do, I would really highly urge students, is to be sure you work on your orientation and mobility. You know, the ability to navigate your surroundings is so vital. It keeps you from being isolated. You know, you can't depend on just a guide dog. You have to have all of those skills need to be good. You know, if you have a guide dog, that's great, but be sure your cane skills are strong still. You know, because of course you shouldn't have a guide dog without having a cane in your bag, right? I mean, you need to be sure all of that is there. So those are the things that I see holding students back. Those two things are probably the most important aspect that will hold students back, both in college, but also in employment. So if I were asked what I would tell job seekers that are blind, I would say the same thing, but I would also say, you know, just remember that as a job seeker, you will be answering to someone else. You know, in college, you have all this great independence, right? And you probably have to answer to your parents to some extent, but college is opening your eyes and your mind, and it's kind of freeing you up. When you get a job, it's exciting, and I want all of our students to have jobs, but no one owes you a job, right? You have to fight for it, and you have to show your very best side, and understand that to have that job, you're going to have to work and prove why you should be able to keep it every day. That's what I do. I know it's what you do at your job, and for whatever reason, it is easy to think that people just kind of that jobs come along, and you know, you should have a job just because you should, and that's not the case. So
right, you have to bring something to the table and show everyone else doesn't know your amazing self, so you have to prove it to them, like you said.
Right? Yeah. Show your passion, and do something that you love, and you will never regret your job at all, as long as it's something that you love.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us from your perspective, and so that we got a little bit more insight about how the program started and just overall what its aims are, so that people know. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. I'll speak with you soon.
Before we go, we'd just like to thank Learning Ally staff for supporting the podcast, and our funders and stakeholders for supporting all that we do. The co-hosts of College Knowledge are Brian Duarte, Rachel Greider, and Rashad Jones. Our program director is Mary Alexander. Our podcast writer is Kristen Wataki. Abigail Shaw produced the audio for the show, and Rachel Greider composed the theme song. Finally, our social media and marketing manager is Katie Otaggio. I'm Rachel Greider, and this is College Knowledge.